The morning sun shone through the large windows of the Lunar Command Center. John Harris sat at his communications station, sipping his third cup of coffee. At 45, with graying hair and steady hands, John had spent 20 years monitoring space traffic between Earth and its colonies. Today was supposed to be like any other day. His screen flashed with an alert, something his systems couldn't identify. John frowned and adjusted his glasses. The signals were coming from beyond Mars, approaching Earth's atmosphere at incredible speed. "Susan, can you take a look at this?" he called out to his colleague. Susan Miller, a military analyst with 30 years of experience, walked over. Her face grew pale as she studied the readings. "Those are weapons signatures," she whispered, her voice tight with fear. "Call Defense Command now." John's fingers flew across his keyboard, but it was already too late. The first impacts began just 90 seconds later. Denver was hit first. A metal rod, simple in design but traveling at nearly orbital velocity, struck the downtown area. The kinetic energy alone created an explosion comparable to a tactical nuclear weapon. Sydney was next, then Beijing, then Cairo. Millions died in the first wave. Screens around the command center displayed the chaos unfolding on Earth. Buildings collapsed, fires spread, and emergency services were overwhelmed. John tried to reach his family in Chicago, but all communications to the surface were becoming spotty and unreliable. "We need to get to the backup systems," Susan said, pulling John away from his station. "This facility is about to lose connection with Earth." In the underground Montana complex known as the Bunker, Paul Franklin received the news of the attack with shocking calmness. As Director of Earth Defense Operations, he had spent his career preparing for crises, though nothing of this magnitude. "Get me visual confirmation of all impact sites," he ordered the room of stunned officers. "And someone find Olivia Wright. We need her here immediately." Paul was a tall man with a commanding presence. At 52, his face showed the lines of someone who had made difficult decisions throughout his career. Today would require the hardest decisions yet. Olivia Wright arrived 20 minutes later, her research team following behind her. At 34, she was the youngest division head in the history of Earth's defense forces. Her experimental shield technology had been deemed too expensive and energy-intensive for full deployment just months earlier. Now, it might be humanity's only hope. "Tell me you can get something working," Paul said as she entered the command room. "I need power and resources," Olivia replied, her voice steady despite the circumstances. "And I need to know what we're facing." The large screen at the front of the room displayed satellite images of the destruction. Major cities around the world were burning. Military bases had been precisely targeted. The attackers had clearly studied Earth carefully before launching their assault. "We've received a transmission," announced Carlos Diaz, the communications specialist. "It's broadcasting on all frequencies." The screen changed to show a strange being. It had a head similar to a praying mantis with compound eyes and mandibles that clicked as it spoke. Its body was covered in a hard, greenish shell that looked like armor. When it spoke, the words were in perfect English. "People of Earth, your planet now belongs to the Carthan Empire. Your technology is primitive, your defenses are inadequate. Submit to Carthan rule within 72 Earth hours, or we will continue our cleansing operation until your resistance ends. There will be no further warnings." The room fell silent as the message ended. Paul looked around at his team, seeing fear in their eyes. "Carlos, get me connected to all remaining military and government leaders worldwide. Susan, I need a complete assessment of our remaining capabilities. John, coordinate with our off-world colonies. I want to know if Mars and Europa were also targeted." People moved with renewed purpose, the shock giving way to action. In a corner of the command center, Olivia spoke quietly with her lead engineer, Greg Peters. "The shield prototypes at White Sands and Svalbard, are they still operational?" she asked. Greg checked his tablet. "White Sands is gone, but Svalbard is responding. It's underground, so it survived the initial attack." "We need to get there," Olivia said. "And we need to gather every engineer and physicist who's still alive." 6 hours after the first attack, Paul gathered the key members of his team for an assessment. "The Carthans hit us with kinetic weapons only, Susan explained, pointing to the data on her screen. No radiation, no chemicals, no biological agents. They want the planet intact. What about our military response options? Paul asked. William Jones, the remaining Joint Chiefs representative, shook his head. Most of our major bases and naval groups were hit in the first wave. We've got submarines still operational, some aircraft and scattered ground forces. Nuclear options are available, but the alien fleet is staying just out of range of our delivery systems. And they're watching every move we make, John added. Any large force we try to gather gets targeted immediately. Paul nodded slowly, processing the information. What about our space assets? Most communication satellites are gone, John said. But our deep space monitoring stations on the far side of the moon weren't targeted. Maybe they didn't know about them. Mars Colony and Europa. Station report no attacks so far. They're focusing on Earth first, Paul concluded. Taking out the headquarters before dealing with the outposts. Olivia stepped forward. I think I can get a shield operational to protect some areas, but not the whole planet. We need to choose locations carefully. Places where we can gather forces and civilians without being detected. How long do we have until they attack again? Paul asked. Susan studied the alien fleet positions on the display. They're holding position. Looks like they're serious about that 72-hour deadline. Then we have 3 days to figure out how to fight back, Paul said, his voice hardening with resolve. I need options, people. Every idea, no matter how crazy it sounds. The next morning, representatives from the remaining world governments joined a secure video conference. Many called in from bunkers and emergency facilities. Some nations had lost their entire leadership. The United Nations Security Council is effectively gone, explained Linda Garcia, one of the few surviving UN officials. But we need to form a unified response. We cannot fight among ourselves while facing this threat. What about surrender? Asked a European representative, his face ashen with fear. Maybe we can negotiate terms, save who we can. Did you not hear their message? Countered a military leader from Africa. This is not negotiation. This is conquest. Paul stepped into view of the camera. We've analyzed their attack pattern. They're methodical, precise. They've studied us, maybe for years, but they've made one critical mistake. What's that? Asked several voices at once. They warned us, Paul said simply. They gave us time. They could have kept bombing us until there was nothing left, but they stopped. Either they're overconfident or they have limitations we can exploit. The meeting continued for hours as the remaining leaders of humanity shared information and began to coordinate their resources. Slowly, a plan started to take shape. 3 days after the initial attack, Paul stood in the Montana Command Center, looking at the satellite imagery of destroyed cities. The room was quiet, tense with anticipation as the deadline approached. John walked up beside him, holding a tablet with the latest reports from their space monitoring stations. The Carthan ships are moving into attack positions, he said quietly. They know we're not surrendering. Paul nodded, his face grim but determined. Get me a direct line to their command ship. I want to send them a message before they start the second wave. When the connection was established, Paul stood tall in front of the camera. His voice was clear and unwavering as he delivered humanity's response. Attention, Carthan forces. We have received your demand and considered it carefully. Our answer is no. We will not surrender our planet or our people. You have shown us what you can do. Now it's our turn. He paused, his eyes cold with determination, and finished with the words that would become humanity's battle cry in the coming conflict. You bombed us? Watch what happens next. The Jupiter research station hung in space like a small metal moon. Hidden behind the giant planet's magnetic field, the station remained undetected by the Carthan invaders. Inside, Lisa Bennett hadn't slept for 30 hours. More coffee? Asked Daniel Green, sliding a steaming cup across the laboratory table. Lisa took it gratefully. At 38, she was the lead scientist at humanity's farthest outpost. Her dark hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and shadows had formed under her eyes. The long-range scans are finally complete, she said, pointing to the screen. Look at their propulsion system. Daniel leaned in, his tired eyes widening. That energy signature, it's different from anything we've seen. The screen showed detailed scans of the Carthan ships. Their propulsion systems glowed with an unusual blue energy that pulsed in strange patterns. They used some kind of jump technology to travel between star systems, Lisa explained. And after each jump, there's a cooling period where their systems are vulnerable. Daniel checked the data again. About 30 minutes of recovery time. That's why they haven't launched a full invasion after their initial attack. Exactly, Lisa said, a spark of hope in her voice. They have limitations, and we just found one. She opened a communication channel to Earth. This is Jupiter Station to any Earth Defense Forces. We have critical information about Carthan technology. On Earth, the war had already begun. Kevin. Rodriguez flew low over the Nevada desert, his aircraft barely skimming the rocky terrain. At 35, the former Navy SEAL had transitioned to aerospace combat 5 years ago. Now he led a desperate mission that might determine the fate of humanity. Target approaching, said his co-pilot Beth Davis. Carthan's scout ship, just as intelligence reported. Kevin nodded, his face set with determination. All teams, report, in. 4 voices confirmed they were in position. The plan was dangerous but simple. Ambush a small Carthan scout ship that had entered Earth's atmosphere, capture it, and learn everything they could about the enemy. Remember, we need that ship intact, Kevin reminded his team. Use the EMP charges first. The alien scout ship moved slowly across the desert, scanning the ground with pulsing green lights. It was smaller than the warships in orbit, about the size of a city bus with a sleek metallic surface that reflected the morning sun. Now, Kevin ordered. From hidden positions around the valley, EMP charges detonated. The scout ship faltered, its lights flickering as it lost altitude. Kevin's team moved in quickly, surrounding the downed craft. Breaching team, go, Kevin commanded. 2. Soldiers approached the ship with cutting tools. The alien metal was tough but yielded to their equipment. As the entry point was created, a burst of energy shot out, hitting Eric Watson squarely in the chest. Eric, Kevin's friend since their SEAL training days, fell without a sound. Defensive measures still active, shouted Beth. Kevin grabbed a heavy EMP rifle. Cover me! He rushed forward as his team provided covering fire against the ship's automated defenses. With one powerful blast from the EMP rifle, the remaining systems shut down. The ship fell silent. We're clear, Kevin announced, though his voice was tight with grief. Get the tech team in here. And... He paused, looking at Eric's body. Prepare a transport for our fallen. Inside the ship, they found no living aliens, only automated systems and a wealth of data. The Carthan craft was designed for efficiency with no comfort or unnecessary features. Everything served a purpose. Their systems are actually compatible with ours, said Alan Morris, the team's tech specialist. Different design, but similar. Digital architecture, almost like they studied our technology. Can you access their database? Kevin asked. Alan nodded, connecting his equipment to the alien systems. It'll take time to translate, but yes, I think so. 6 hours later, in the Montana bunker, Paul Franklin reviewed the information from both the Jupiter station and the captured scout ship. So they've done this before, he said grimly. Susan Miller nodded, displaying the translated Carthan records. 12 other species, all conquered using the same method. Surprise attack, demand for surrender, then either acceptance of terms or complete destruction. And no one has ever successfully fought them off? Paul asked. Not according to their records, Susan confirmed, but none of those species had our particular advantages. Which are? Susan pulled up a map of the solar system. We're spread out. Even with Earth hit hard, we have colonies and outposts across the system. The Carthans focus on conquering homeworlds, assuming the colonies will fall in line afterward. Paul considered this information. And Lisa's discovery about their jump drives gives us a window of opportunity. A small one, Susan cautioned. But yes. In what remained of Washington, D.C., world leaders gathered in a reinforced underground facility. The meeting room was crowded with representatives from countries around the globe, many of whom had been bitter enemies just days before. Sharon Patterson, the United Nations Secretary, stood at the front of the room. At 60, she had navigated countless international crises, but nothing like this. "We need to understand what conventional responses won't work," she explained to the assembled leaders. "The Carthans expect us to either surrender or launch our nuclear weapons in desperation." "What choice do we have?" asked the Russian representative. "Their ships are beyond the reach of most of our weapons." Sharon gestured to a young military officer who stepped forward with a tablet. "This is Colonel Ryan West. He's been coordinating with our remaining military assets and colonies." Ryan displayed a series of diagrams on the main screen. "The Carthans expect us to act like their previous victims, either give up or lash out blindly. We need to do something they won't anticipate." "Like what?" several voices asked at once. "A coordinated response," Ryan explained, "using all human outposts across the solar system. We call it Operation Payback." The plan took shape as representatives from Mars Colony, Europa Station, and the remaining Earth forces shared ideas. For the first time since the attack, a sense of hope began to grow. Meanwhile, Kevin Rodriguez and his team continued to study the captured Carthan ship. "Their armor is impressive," Kevin noted, examining a piece of the alien hull. "But not impenetrable." Beth pointed to a schematic they'd created. "There are weak points at these junctions. If we can target them specifically, we'd need to get close," Kevin said. "Really close?" Beth nodded grimly. "I've been thinking about that. These scout ships are designed to blend in with their fleet. If we can repair it enough to fly," Kevin's eyes widened as he understood, "we could approach their main vessels without raising suspicion." "Exactly," Beth confirmed. "A Trojan horse." As the deadline approached its final hours, Paul received updates from around the solar system. From Mars: mining explosives repurposed as requested, drilling vehicles converted for combat operations, standing by. Frank Martinez, from Europa: deep-sea exploration vehicles modified for space operations. Submersible tactics should translate well to 0G. Ready on your mark. Amanda Kelly. From Earth orbit: civilian space stations evacuated, prepared to deorbit on command to create debris field. Carlos Vasquez. From Montana: shield technology deployed around remaining population centers. Power systems stable but limited. Olivia Wright. And perhaps most surprisingly, from a retirement community in Florida that had somehow escaped the initial attack. Virus completed and tested on captured Carthan systems. 94% success rate. Uploading to secure server now. Barbara Wilson, PhD. Paul gathered his core team for a final review of Operation Payback. The room was tense but focused, each person understanding the weight of what they were about to attempt. "The Carthans will be expecting our surrender," Paul said. "When they don't get it, they'll launch their second wave of attacks, at which point we'll be ready," Susan added. John Harris looked up from his communications console. "We're receiving a transmission from the Carthan command ship. They're requesting our answer to their surrender demand." Paul took a deep breath and nodded to John. "Open a channel." The screen filled with the image of the Carthan commander, its compound eyes gleaming and mandibles clicking impatiently. "Your time has expired," the alien said. "What is your decision?" Paul stood tall, his voice steady. "We've thought carefully about your offer. We decline." The Carthan commander tilted its head, clearly surprised by the response. "You choose extinction over submission? Unwise." "Perhaps," Paul replied, "but we have a saying on Earth, don't start what you can't finish." He paused, making sure he had the alien's full attention. "You bombed us? Watch what happens next." As the transmission ended, Paul turned to his team. "Send the signal. Operation Payback begins now. Across the solar system, humans prepared for the greatest fight of their existence. Not just for survival, but for vengeance." The Carthan commander stared at the empty screen where Paul Franklin's face had been moments before. The humans' defiance was unexpected. In all 12 previous conquests, no species had rejected the final ultimatum. They are either brave or foolish, the commander said to his second-in-command. Prepare the second wave. Target their remaining military installations first, then population centers. Back in the Montana bunker, Paul turned to his team. They'll be launching their attack soon. Is everyone in position? Susan Miller checked the Global Defense Network. All Earth forces report ready. Space assets are in position. John Harris monitored communications from the off-world colonies. Mars and Europa teams confirm they're ready to move on your command. Paul nodded, his face showing the strain of the past 3 days. He hadn't slept more than a few hours, but adrenaline kept him alert. Then we wait for them to make the first move. On Mars, Frank Martinez checked the final modifications to his mining vehicles. The Mars colony had been established 15 years ago, primarily for resource extraction. The heavy drilling machines were designed to bore through the Martian surface in search of valuable minerals. Now, they had a different purpose. Power systems at maximum, reported Heather Young, his chief engineer. Drill bits replaced with the modified penetrators. Frank patted the side of his vehicle, a massive machine with treads that could navigate the rough Martian terrain. Who would have thought our mining equipment would end up being our best weapon? The 20 converted mining vehicles were hidden in various caves and canyons around the Martian surface. Each was piloted by a team of 2, a driver and a weapons specialist. Their mission: approach the Carthan ships when they entered Mars orbit and use the powerful drills to penetrate their hulls at the Europa outpost deep beneath the icy surface of Jupiter's moon. Amanda Kelly prepared her team. The research station had been built to explore Europa's vast subsurface ocean, using specially designed submersibles that could withstand extreme pressure. These modifications should hold in vacuum, she explained to her 12 team members. The principles are the same: a hostile environment that requires specialized equipment to survive. The submersibles, now retrofitted as space insertion vehicles, were small and maneuverable. Each contained enough air for 6 hours and was equipped with magnetic clamps that could attach to the Carthan ships' hulls. Their teams would then use cutting tools originally designed for ice sampling to create entry points. Remember, once we're attached to their hull, we need to work quickly, Amanda said. We'll have maybe 15 minutes before they detect us. In Earth orbit, Carlos Vasquez coordinated from the one remaining space station that hadn't been evacuated. 10 civilian stations, now empty of people, were being prepared for a controlled deorbit. Trajectory calculations complete, his engineer reported. On your command, we can send them down. Carlos nodded. Wait for the signal. Timing is everything. The plan was to create a massive debris field that would confuse Carthan sensors and provide cover for Earth's remaining fighters. It was a desperate move, sacrificing billions of dollars worth of infrastructure, but these were desperate times. On Earth, Olivia Wright monitored her shield system from a control center in what remained of London. The experimental technology created a shimmering dome of energy over the city, one of 6 such shields now protecting the last major population centers. Power consumption is high but stable, she reported to Paul. We can maintain the shields for about 12 hours before the generators give out. That should be enough, Paul replied. One way or another, this will be decided before then. The most unexpected contribution to Operation Payback came from Barbara Wilson. At 63, the retired computer scientist had been living quietly in Florida when the attack began. Her retirement community had somehow been overlooked in the initial bombardment. The virus is ready, she told Paul via a secure connection. It's designed to target their navigational systems first, then weapons, then life support. Each module activates in sequence to avoid early detection. How did you create this so quickly? Paul asked, amazed that someone who had been officially retired for 5 years could produce something so complex in just 3 days. Barbara smiled, her face lined with age but her eyes sharp. I spent 40 years designing protection systems against cyber attacks. Creating viruses is the same skill, just in reverse. Besides, their computer architecture isn't that different from ours. They prioritize efficiency over security, a common mistake. As the deadline approached, Human representatives requested an extension for surrender discussions. This was merely a distraction, buying precious time for the final preparations. The Carthan commander agreed to a 6-hour extension, confident in victory. The mantis-like alien believed this showed the humans were simply prolonging the inevitable, perhaps hoping for a miracle that would never come. They will surrender, the commander told his fleet, or they will perish. Either way, Earth will join the Carthan Empire before the day ends. During those 6 hours, the final pieces of Operation Payback fell into place. Small stealth craft, converted from various civilian and military vehicles, moved into position throughout the solar system. Earth's remaining military forces prepared for what everyone knew might be humanity's last stand. In homes and shelters across the planet, people huddled around communication devices, listening to updates. Parents held their children close. Strangers became allies, sharing food and comfort. The attack had killed millions, but it had also united humanity in a way nothing else ever had. In Washington, Sharon Patterson addressed the Emergency Global Council one final time before the Carthan deadline expired. "We've always been divided by borders, by politics, by religion," she said to the assembled leaders. "Today we are simply humans fighting for our right to exist. Whatever happens in the coming hours, remember this moment when the people of Earth stood together." As the 6-hour extension neared its end, the Carthan ships began moving into attack positions. The massive vessels, each the size of a small city, formed a precise pattern above Earth. Smaller ships broke off, heading toward Mars and Europa. Just as predicted, they were now expanding their attack to include the colonies. In the Montana bunker, Paul watched the tactical display with his team. The Carthan positions appeared as red dots, surrounding the blue dots representing Earth's defenses. "They're positioning for maximum coverage," Susan noted, "just like before. And that makes them predictable," Paul replied. He turned to John. "Send the signal." John pressed a series of commands into his console. Across the solar system, human forces received the simple message, "Payback begins." On Mars, Frank Martinez started the engine of his modified mining vehicle. "Let's show these bugs what Martians can do," he said to Heather as they emerged from their hiding place. At Europa, Amanda Kelly led her team toward the surface in their converted submersibles. "Remember your training," she said calmly. "The ocean taught us patience. Space is no different." In Earth orbit, Carlos gave the command. "Release the stations, create our cover." The civilian space stations began their controlled fall toward the Carthan fleet, breaking apart as they descended, and creating a cloud of debris that immediately confused the alien sensors. In London, Olivia Wright diverted extra power to the shields as the first Carthan weapons fired. The energy dome above the city glowed brighter, absorbing the impact. "Shields holding," she reported, though sweat beaded on her forehead from tension. And from her simple desk in Florida, Barbara Wilson uploaded her virus to a secure server, where Kevin Rodriguez's team would deploy it directly into the Carthan systems once they breached the ships. The Carthan commander watched with satisfaction as his fleet began the second wave of attacks. His satisfaction turned to confusion as alarms began sounding throughout his command ship. "What is happening?" he demanded. "Debris field interfering with targeting systems," his officer reported, "and we're detecting small objects approaching our ships, but they're too small to be weapons." The commander stared at the display, trying to understand the human strategy. It made no sense. Their shields were primitive and could not withstand prolonged bombardment. Their weapons could not reach the Carthan ships in high orbit. What were they planning? As if in answer to his unspoken question, the human representative sent one final message before cutting communications. "We decline your offer. You bombed us. Watch what happens next." Operation Payback had begun. The Carthan commander laughed as he received the human's final message. These primitive beings still believed they could fight back. How amusing. In 12 previous conquests, no species had ever successfully resisted the Carthan Empire. "Begin." "The second wave," he ordered. "Show no mercy." As the Carthan ships positioned themselves for the assault, They briefly lowered certain defensive systems to power up their weapons. This was exactly what Operation Payback had been waiting for. Now, Paul Franklin commanded from the Montana bunker. Across the solar system, hundreds of small human craft emerged from hiding places. They had been waiting, engines cold, nearly invisible against the background of space. On Mars, Frank Martinez activated his modified mining vehicle. The massive machine, designed to drill through solid rock, rumbled across the red planet's surface toward the nearest Carthan ship that had entered low orbit. Approaching target, Frank reported to Heather Young, who operated the newly installed weapon systems. Get ready with the magnetic clamps. The mining vehicles had been outfitted with powerful magnets that could attach to the alien hulls, allowing the drills to do their work. As Frank's vehicle leapt from the Martian surface, boosted by emergency thrusters, Heather activated the clamps. With a heavy thud, they connected to the Carthan ship's underside. Around them, other mining vehicles did the same, attaching to different points on the massive vessel. Drill engaged, Frank announced, activating the powerful mechanism. The drill, designed to cut through the hardest Martian bedrock, began to penetrate the alien hull. Metal screamed as the drill bit deeper. "We're through," Frank called out a minute later. Placing the charges, each mining team carried powerful explosives, originally used for breaking apart stubborn mineral deposits. Now they were carefully positioned at critical junctions inside the Carthan ships. From the icy moon of Europa, Amanda Kelly led her team in their modified submersibles. The vehicles, once designed to explore deep underwater trenches, now moved silently through space toward another group of Carthan vessels. Maintain communication silence until attachment, Amanda reminded her team. Remember your training. Treat this like a deep dive. Her submersible reached the hull of a Carthan ship and attached using specially designed clamps. The cutting tools, once used for ice sampling, quickly created an entry point. Within minutes, Amanda's team was inside the alien vessel. "We're in," she whispered into her communicator. Beginning Phase 2. Each team carried portable drives containing Barbara Wilson's virus. Their mission: find access points to the Carthan computer systems and deploy the virus directly. Amanda found what appeared to be a control junction and carefully connected the drive. The virus began to spread immediately, jumping from system to system throughout the connected Carthan fleet. Barbara had designed it to remain hidden at first, gathering information and establishing control before making its presence known. In Earth orbit, the debris field created by the deorbited space stations created mass confusion among the Carthan fleet. Their sensors, designed to target large military installations or cities, struggled to distinguish between harmless debris and potential threats. Using this cover, Earth's remaining fighters launched from hidden bases. Kevin Rodriguez led a squadron of 20 craft, each armed with weapons designed based on the captured scout ship's vulnerabilities. "Target their propulsion systems," Kevin ordered his pilots. "Those junction points we identified." The human fighters darted through the debris field, nearly invisible among the tumbling remains of the space stations. The Carthan ships, their attention focused on bombarding Earth's surface, didn't notice the small craft until it was too late. Kevin's fighter fired a specially designed missile at a vulnerable point on a Carthan landing craft. The explosion wasn't large, but it was precisely targeted, disabling the vessel's ability to maneuver. "First one down," Kevin reported. "Move to secondary targets." Across his squadron, similar reports came in as more Carthan vessels were disabled or destroyed. The aliens, caught by surprise, scrambled to respond to an attack they hadn't anticipated. On Earth, Olivia Wright monitored the shield systems protecting the remaining population centers. As the Carthan bombardment intensified, the energy domes flickered but held. "Diverting emergency power," she announced as warnings flashed across her screen. The shields weren't designed to withstand such a sustained attack, but they only needed to hold long enough for the rest of Operation Payback to succeed. In the Montana bunker, Paul and his team watched the battle unfold across the solar system. Reports came in from all teams. Mars team reports charges placed on 3 capital ships. Europa team has deployed the virus to 5 vessels. Fighter squadron has disabled 14 landing craft. Paul nodded grimly. Activate the charges on the Mars targets. The explosives detonated simultaneously, creating precise, devastating damage to the Carthan ship's internal systems. Unlike the aliens' attack on Earth, these weren't designed to destroy the ships entirely, but to disable their weapons and control systems. On the Carthan command ship, the commander stared in disbelief as alerts sounded from every direction. Multiple hull breaches on vessels in Mars orbit, reported his second-in-command. Ships in Europa sector reporting control system failures. Earth orbital forces under attack from something small hiding in the debris field. Impossible, the commander hissed. These humans are primitives. They cannot. His words were cut short as the main display flickered and went dark. When it returned, all the control systems showed errors. The virus had reached the command ship. What is happening? The commander demanded. The ship's systems began to act erratically. Weapons powered down. Navigation systems reported false positions. Life support fluctuated. The virus spread rapidly through the connected Carthan fleet. Ships that remained unaffected suddenly found themselves under attack from their own compromised vessels, as Barbara's virus turned the aliens' technology against them. In orbit around Earth, Carthan landing craft intended to begin the ground. Invasion were intercepted by Kevin's fighters. He flew with reckless determination, inspired by the memory of his fallen friend Eric. "This is for Earth," Kevin said as he fired on another alien vessel. "And this one's for Eric." The Carthan commander, facing a rapidly deteriorating situation, attempted to contact their homeworld for reinforcements. But John Harris at Lunar Command had been working with Lisa Bennett and Daniel Green to develop a false response signal. The Carthans received what they believed was a message from their leadership. Strategic situation compromised. Return to Sector 7 for reassessment and reinforcement. "We are being recalled?" the commander asked, confused by the order. With their communications compromised, their ships damaged or disabled, and facing an enemy far more resourceful than expected, the remaining Carthan vessels began to retreat. Several were captured intact by human forces. As the alien fleet withdrew from Earth orbit, cheers erupted in command centers across the planet and throughout the colonies. The shields protecting the cities slowly powered down as the threat receded. In the aftermath, Sharon Patterson addressed the survivors on Earth and across the colonies via a global broadcast. "Today we've done more than survive," she announced, her voice steady despite her exhaustion. "We've shown the galaxy something they've never seen before. What happens when you underestimate humanity?" 3 days later, Paul Franklin stood in the Montana control room, watching as scientists studied the captured Carthan ships. Lisa Bennett had arrived from Jupiter with her latest findings, the location of the Carthan homeworld and their colony planets. "They thought this was the end," Paul said, looking at the star chart. "They were wrong. This was just the beginning." Susan Miller joined them, holding a tablet with a tactical assessment. "Their other conquered species are already beginning to rebel," she reported. "Word of what happened here is spreading." John Harris, monitoring communications, turned to them with a smile. "And the best part? We've just received a transmission from the 7th world in the Carthan Empire. They're asking for our help." Paul nodded grimly. "Tell them we're on our way." His eyes narrowed as he studied the map of Carthan territory. "Let's show the galaxy what happens when you pick a fight with humans." In orbit above Earth, Kevin Rodriguez looked out the window of his fighter at the planet below. The scars of the Carthan attack were visible even from space, but humanity had survived. More than that, they had fought back and won. "We did it, Eric," he whispered to his fallen friend. "You would have been proud." As the sun rose over a damaged but undefeated Earth, humanity began to rebuild. But this time, they were not just citizens of one planet. They were warriors who had faced extinction and refused to surrender. They were the species that had taught the Carthan Empire a painful lesson. If you bomb humans, you better be ready for what happens next.